Welcome back, Friday Night Friends, to our bonus Halloween episode for Halloween week to celebrate Halloween. How many times can I say Halloween at the beginning of this episode?
Halloween.
Exactly. It's like, this is Halloween. It's like the opening song to that one Tim Burton film that The Nightmare Before Christmas. But to celebrate Halloween and the season of spookiness, we've decided that we're going to watch a classic slasher film. You guessed it. We're going to watch Halloween.
This is Scary Movie Fright Night,
a podcast about two guys who just watch scary movies. I'm Chris, and I love scary movies.
And I'm Sam, and I hate scary movies. My body just shook. Give me the heebie-jeebies. No, don't. All you have to do is stay inside in your bed, and then you won't get murdered. Oh. Okay. Now you have that recorded.
So, like we said, it's Halloween week. We're taking it back to the beginning, to Michael Myers' origin, where his journey began, the first of many different timelines, the original Halloween movie. Honestly, I'm so excited because if you tuned in last season, Sam chose between three 80s classic slasher films, and he chose Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a great way to start. But I was wondering how we were going to incorporate Halloween, and what better time than to do it
on
Halloween again. I don't know why I keep saying that word. It's because I love it. It's my favorite season.
Yeah, every time we say Halloween, you have to take a shot. Just kidding.
That's true. Oh man, I would be wasted already. But before we get into it, it's a really old movie. So we're gonna give you a little recap. Make sure that if you didn't watch it before this episode, that you at least remember what it's about. Pretty basic, pretty quick recap. But to start, Halloween came out in 1978 when I was -4 years old. Written and directed by John Carpenter and co-written and produced by Deborah Hill. Starring the queen of slasher films herself, Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, and Tony Morgan as the infamous Michael Myers. IMDb gave it a 7.7 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 96%.
Wow. That's pretty
96%.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, 89% audience score, and I agree. I love this movie. It just brings back all the feels for me. It's weird for me to have such joyous feelings watching the movie, but again, I'm digressing. Without further ado, here is the recap of Halloween. The film begins in the fictional town of Haydenfield, Illinois, on Halloween night in 1963. A young boy named Michael Myers, dressed in a clown costume, brutally murders his teenage sister Judith with a kitchen knife. He's subsequently institutionalized at the Smiths Grove Sanitarium. 15 years later, on October 30th, 1978, he got really excited for Halloween and decides to escape from the sanitarium and return to Haydenfield. He steals a William Shatner mask.
Oh, there's the trivia.
Wait, is it really a William Shatner mask?
Oh, we'll get to this.
Okay, sorry. I should have read the synopsis. Anyway, I'm learning things as I'm reading it. Okay, to continue. He steals a William Shatner mask that I wasn't tracking was a William Shatner mask, and a knife, and sets his sights on Laurie Strode, a high school student who's babysitting two children, Tommy and Lindsay, for the evening. Dr. Loomis, Michael's psychiatrist, rushes to Haydenfield to warn the authorities about Michael's escape. As Halloween night unfolds, Michael stalks Laurie and her friends, Annie and Linda, who are all unaware of the danger they are in. Dr. Loomis desperately searches for Michael while trying to convince the local sheriff of the threat. Michael's killing spree begins, and he systematically eliminates all of Laurie's friends one by one. Laurie becomes increasingly frightened as she realizes she is being pursued by an unstoppable, emotionless killer. She eventually manages to defend herself and the children she's babysitting from Michael's attacks. In a climactic showdown, Dr. Loomis arrives just in time to shoot Michael 700 times, give or take, and he falls over a balcony. But when they look, he's vanished. The end. Relatively short synopsis, but it took me 12 times to get it right.
That's all right. You mentioned the William Shatner mask. This was the first, I think, really interesting piece of trivia about this movie. It is, in fact, I hate William Shatner. So I read this online, and I was like reading an article or something about the history of the genre and this movie, and it said something about the William Shatner mask, and I was like, is that a joke? Like, oh, it kind of looks like William Shatner, maybe. Like, but what actually happened was when they made this movie on a like shoestring budget, $300,000, and then went
Oh
on
wow.
to gross 47 million at the US box office. So, and I think they filmed it in like 4 weeks. It was a like very rapid production on a low budget. They said, we need a mask for the villain. So they had two options. They created two masks that they were considering. The first mask was like a smiling clown mask, which, if you remember, I
Hmm.
think you said this in the synopsis. Young, um, what's his name?
Michael Myers.
Young Michael Myers was dressed as a clown. So that
Yeah.
was the first mask that they were like, oh, let's try this like smiling clown, like this demented look. And then the second one, they found a mask, I think in like a prop store or Halloween store or something from, so William Shatner was an actor on Star Trek, and they had created a mask
Right.
that they used as like a death mask. I haven't seen Star Trek, so I don't know what happened to his
What?
character, but I
Weird.
read in an interview that they would use it if they needed to like as a prosthetic, if they needed to shape
Okay.
things or something
Okay.
and they didn't need to have him always there, they could just use his mask. So they took
Strange.
this William
Okay.
Shatner mask and they modified it, painted it white, cut out the eye holes a little bit, and took off
Hmm.
the eyebrows. And then they said,
What?
between the demented smiling clown mask and the William Shatner mask, they were like, the William Shatner one is actually scarier because it's just like emotionless. And
That is crazy.
that's the history of the mask.
How did I not know that it was a William Shatner mask?
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy. Also, I mean, okay, so classic Star Trek, and I know you just said that you've never seen Star Trek, and I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole. You're trying.
Have you? Do you know like the whole history with his character on Star Trek?
I mean, he was Captain Kirk. He was the captain
Oh,
of the ship
he
in
was
the
like
original
the
Star
main
Trek.
guy. Okay.
Like he was. I mean, there was lots of main guys. There was Spock,
Oh,
the Klingon. You know, there was. I mean, all the folks. But like of the original Star Trek that started all of
yeah,
it, he was the captain of the ship. Yeah.
got it.
But either way, again, you're. I feel like you tricked me by being like this iconic thing that everyone knows about. I haven't seen it,
I have the
but
trivia, but I
so
don't actually know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so funny that I guess 1978, you know, in the prime original Star Trek time, that there's a mask out there with his face and they cut it out. I never would have guessed
Yeah.
it. That's crazy. And again, it showed up in my recap that I did not preview before I read it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that's like a well-known like people who are fans of Halloween, if they, I mean, because I read it in an article, you just read it in the synopsis. I wonder if it's like kind of a commonly known little trivia fact among true fans.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty big fan in general, but I mean, apparently I'm not a big enough fan to do all the trivia and figure it out. That I will literally text my mom after this and we'll talk about the different timelines and all the movies I saw as a kid watching Halloween, but I guarantee you she doesn't know that
Yeah.
bit of trivia. She's probably going to be
Well,
surprised. If she didn't know it, she's been holding out on me.
she's going to be like, how did you not know? Everybody knows that.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to
But can
happen.
you,
She's gonna be like, "Oh, I trained you poorly as a child."
yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine
Yeah.
though if that was your face that they created? Like,
I would be so excited.
really?
Especially now, 40 years later. This is like, I mean, 45-ish,
Yeah.
right? Like that's epic. That'd be pretty epic. Now, unlike, what was it that it was one of the movies from last season and they had named the bad person after
Yes.
someone from their childhood.
Oh, which movie was that?
And
Wait, it was Freddy Krueger.
oh, it was
It was
Freddy
Freddy
Krueger.
Krueger,
Yeah,
yeah.
because Wes Craven had a Fred Krueger that was like
Yes.
a bully or something. And then so that's a little bit different to where like your name lives on in history as like someone who murdered children and
Right.
also like, you know, and goes and does crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But if it was my face, I mean, little bald, you know, good looking face with my eyes cut out, like, hey, I
Like
would
for
wear it.
Halloween,
That would be
you
weird,
wouldn't even
but
have to wear a mask. You could just paint your face white and wax off your eyebrows.
ooh,
There you go.
yeah, and paint your eyelids black and just walk around with your eyes closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Um, so now that wow, William Shatner, we'll find the scariest episode of Star Trek and we'll integrate it in for a bonus
There we go.
episode. Yeah. So what did you think about Halloween? I have opinions. I grew up on this. Like, obviously it came out before I was born. And I'm going to get into the timeline a little bit later, but I have a few notes about what I thought, but really, more importantly, from Sam, who grew up not even knowing that Halloween was a holiday. Just kidding. But what did you think of the movie? What was your thoughts? Like, obviously, old and campy,
Yeah.
but like,
there's a lot that I don't know, but I definitely know that Halloween is a holiday. Okay. So what did I think about it?
Mhm.
It kind of made me think of Nightmare on Elm Street. Less funny.
Okay.
Like Nightmare on Elm Street brought a little bit of comedy to it. This one, there were two really specific things that I thought were kind of funny.
Mhm.
The first
Yeah.
one was the fact that they had there was a lot of jack-o'-lanterns in the movie.
There
You're right.
was.
Like there's the one scene where Jamie Lee Curtis is like carrying the jack-o'-lantern like through the dining
Yeah.
room, like almost like a little ceremony. And you see them
Yeah.
all over the place. Eh,
Well, and then the kid had one at school when the bullies were picking on him. He
Yes,
he
like,
fell on his
bro, why are you
pumpkin, and
carrying around this giant ass
I mean,
pumpkin?
people do pumpkin carving. I've went to a pumpkin carving
Oh, I
party
love
before
pumpkin
where we
carving.
all carved pumpkin. Yeah, and so like back in 1978, that's just
But
what you did. You just carried a pumpkin at school with you,
oh, okay.
I guess. I don't know, but there were
And
a
he
lot of
fell
pumpkins.
on
You're
it
right.
and then it crushed. That yeah.
Yeah, jerks.
But the pumpkin or the jack-o'-lantern that really made me laugh was the like bedside jack-o'-lantern when that one of the teenage couples
That
was
was
like,
weird. You're trying to start a
yeah.
fire.
I
That's
was like, why is
what are
this
you
in your
doing? Putting a jack-o'-lantern in your
yeah.
house.
I was like, what is going on?
1978. There was no fire safety in
No, there was
1978.
not. So that kind of made me chuckle a little
Romantic
bit. And
though.
the other thing that I found funny was I don't think this was meant to be funny. Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Mhm.
When I keep wanting to say Freddy Krueger, when Michael Myers, so there was the scene
Yeah.
where one of the couples was hooking up, and then the guy goes downstairs to get her a beer,
Yeah.
and then again Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers stabs him into the
Yeah.
wall, like
Mhm.
pierces him, and he's like,
Lots
"Yep,
of force.
very strong knife." And so then he comes back upstairs, and he's wearing a bed sheet
Yeah, with
with
glasses on
glasses
it.
on it, and the door just like slowly opens, and he's just standing there. And I just
Yep.
thought it was so ridiculous and silly that it kind of made me laugh. What did you think about it? Do you think that was intended to be funny?
It was interesting, and so I made mental note of that as well, because I don't think that Michael Myers is pretty cut and dry, right? He's an unstoppable
Mm-hmm.
force. He has super strength, as we
Mm-hmm.
noticed. He makes sure that when he steals knives, he gets ones that are probably made of Japanese steel, so he can stab through a body and through a
Yeah.
wall, and it will hold in place. But he's not one to be like a strategist. He's not a hunter. He's not like a humorous person. But that scene, I was just like, there's a little bit of like, I'm gonna play this, like, you know what I mean? It had, because it wasn't tricky. He could have
Right.
just walked in and went after her, right?
Was
So
it
so
playfulness?
whatever that character yeah, it's like playfulness that they built in. I mean, it's the first of many, many movies, right? So I think that you don't see that as much later, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's just pretty cut and dry, cold stone. I'm not even running. I'm just walking, and I'm still going to
Mm-hmm.
catch you. So that seemed a little bit out of
Mm,
character, but it did see like playful. I don't see any other like motive other than like, haha,
yeah.
gotcha, which also doesn't seem in character. But then on the other thing I thought about is when Lori goes over there and finds all of her friends. First of all, he staged all of them in a very odd way,
Yeah.
right? He staged their bodies. And then she tries to escape out the back door by the kitchen, and he has blocked it from the outside. So he's strategically, what's the word that I was thinking of? He like premeditated.
Ah.
He premeditated her coming
Right.
over and like blocking her in and trapping her, which is not stupid. I'm not saying he's an idiot, but I just don't think in my mind that that's what I would expect from Michael Myers, for him to do something so premeditated to trap someone. And maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
wrong. But those two things I definitely caught as like, oh, not what I would expect from this like weird, soulless, evil,
Yeah.
being with super strength and
Well,
stuff. Yeah,
this was the first Halloween movie, and I know
it
you
was.
have. We
Yeah.
want to do like a full walkthrough of the whole Halloween like universe in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
maybe because it was the first one, maybe they were still trying to figure out who he was. Like, what is
It's
his
probably true.
thing? Maybe they were playing with like different ideas. I did find um, there's a Vox article about the Halloween movie and well,
Mhm.
all of the movies, and they gave you, there's 5 rules of Michael Myers. And you
Okay.
actually, I think you just hinted at one of these. So let me
Okay.
tell you what the 5 rules of Michael Myers are. We can see
Yeah.
if you agree with all of these. The first one is that he always wears a mask and he never ever speaks.
Facts. Yep.
Facts.
Mhm.
I think there was a caveat there that in one of the movies we hear his voice in a flashback, maybe from his childhood,
Maybe.
but
Maybe.
generally he never speaks. Okay.
Right. Okay.
The second one, I saw this in the credits, but I didn't understand it until I read this rule that he's usually credited as the Shape.
Weird.
Like in the final credits, you'll see
Really?
it'll say like, it doesn't say Michael Myers, it says the Shape. I don't know
Strange.
why. Because the credits are not very long. Like I said,
Right.
this was a small budget, like not, this was not an Avengers movie with like
Mhm.
200,000 people who made it. It was like
Right.
50 people. So I sat and watched the whole credits scroll and I was like, oh, this is a tiny movie. And so I saw the Shape and was like, what was the Shape? What happened during the movie? Who was the Shape? What was that? That was it. It was just Michael Myers.
Weird.
He's also always referred to at some point in the movie as the Boogeyman. And
Yep.
that
Yep.
completely
That's
happened.
pretty common. Yeah.
The third rule is that Michael is always obsessed with Laurie Strode, Jamie
Okay.
Lee Curtis's character, or her nearest relations.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
The fourth rule is that he never runs. He always
facts.
just walks slowly after his victims. He's never in a hurry.
Yeah. He's always just cold, concise, and just walks where he's going.
Yeah.
Although this isn't a rule, but this is another thing that I thought about watching this movie. He does a lot of driving in this movie. He spends a lot of time in that stolen car. And so I
Yeah.
was like, one, did he ever have to get gas? Because he drove all the way back from the mental institution. And he's driving that car all over. He's parking outside the school. He's driving,
Yeah.
stalking her in the car. Like, oh, let me
Yep.
go drive by the girls and then drive real fast and stop and drive again and then park the car. Like, this dude like was locked up at like 8 years old or something. But
Right.
apparently he figured out how to drive real quick. Now, it wasn't a manual, so I'm sure he figured it out. But I was like, man, he spends a lot of time driving. Not that he doesn't drive anywhere else, but this one I was like, man, half this movie he's just driving around. He's like, man, I've missed this. Windows down, wind
Yep.
in his hair,
Riding
stalking
slow.
some babysitters. Yeah.
That's funny that you mentioned like him driving and getting gas, because I feel like there's this, I've seen this sort of like trend. I don't know if it's like a trend. I've seen this on social media where people will buy my. Okay, let me slow down for a second.
Okay.
Sorry. I have seen this on social media where people will buy Michael Myers masks and wear them, but like do a dance, or they'll be doing something like, I can't think of an example right now. I'm gonna have to go look for a video, but just like seeing the emotionless mask while they're like pumping gas or like standing at a concert or something, because it's just out of context. It's actually kind of funny.
Well, and you posted one quite a while back on Instagram, right? It was like Britney, like someone doing the same dance as Britney Spears.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes. Yeah. That's
literally just someone in a Michael Myers mask.
Yeah, that was a while back when she was doing the knife dance.
Which is funny because when you posted that, I actually thought it was William Shatner dancing, and then I realized,
and you're like, oh, that's not William Shatner who painted his face white.
It's good old Mikey M that we used to call him back in the day. No one called him that.
Didn't know William could had the moves.
Yep, Will's got the grooves.
Yeah, I'll fish that video up and repost it. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, that is funny. But yeah, the 5 rules, that makes sense. So
there's one more rule.
Oh, that was 4.
I only gave you 4. Yeah, the last one is just pretty simple. It's that he can't be killed. Okay, and it lists all of the attempts of the ways that the things that he survived. We talked about this movie. He survives the gunshots and the falling off the balcony.
And stabs.
He gets stabbed. How many can you list from memory? Because I haven't seen any of those.
Let me think about this. Okay, how many are there? Do you know off the top of your head?
And including gunshots and stabbings, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and kind of a 9th one.
Okay, kind of 9. Okay, so he's definitely we talked about. So gunshots. He's been stabbed.
Yep.
I think he's been run over by a car.
Okay.
He's been
that's one.
He's been burned.
Yep.
He's been, so that's, what is that, 4?
That's
I got
4.
5 more. I don't know if I'm going to get the other 5. Let's see. What other ways to die are there? He's had a heart attack. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I feel like 4 out of 9 is pretty good. No,
that is really good. I haven't seen any of the other movies, so that I wouldn't have gotten any. The others were explosions, car
Okay.
crashes, which is similar to being run over, but whatever.
True. Yeah, but that makes sense. Yep.
Electrocution,
Mm-hmm.
having his skull bashed in.
Oh, okay. Electrocution. I don't remember that one, but okay. Skull bashed in.
Yeah. And then the last one is sorta being decapitated,
Oh,
like a
that's
nearly
sort of.
headless Nick situation.
I think so. Spoiler to I'm not going to tell you which movie it is. At the end of the movie, they cut his head off, and then in the next movie, you find out he put his mask on someone else. So that doesn't count.
Okay.
They decapitated the wrong person when they decided to make another movie. Like that was their way of being like, he's gone, and then they were like, or we could make another movie where he put the mask on someone else, and we think he's dead.
Got it.
I don't know if that's actually how the plan went. So that one doesn't really count.
Okay, fair enough.
So I got a 50%. And if you combine running over with car crashes, then really, I'm just kidding.
No, I'll take 80%.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. So those are the rules of Michael Myers.
The rules of Michael Myers, which I feel like I should have a T-shirt that says the 5 rules of Michael Myers. That's interesting. So
don't
I've learned
Michael Myers.
Rule number 1 of Michael Myers: don't talk about Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to say his name? Anyway, rule number 2: don't walk away from him. Run, and you'll be fine.
That's a great point. Just keep running.
Just keep running. If you do marathon training, then he'll never catch you.
Maybe he'll get in the car.
Unless you trip and fall.
Because he loves to drive.
Oh, damn. Because he knows how to drive. He likes to put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah, although I feel like he never really sped. He would just like slowly drive through the neighborhood.
Well, he drives like he walks. Just along a pace.
Yeah.
Along a pace.
It seems like he'd be easy to defeat. But maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get an axe, cut both of his feet off, then he'd been defeated.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, it's like when he was deheaded. No, not the same. Okay.
Decapitated.
So what else? What else are my favorite parts? I'll talk about. Yeah. So, I'm learning a whole lot. William Shatner's here to play. We got all the rules. Hey, if you're enjoying Scary Movie Fright Night, hit pause real quick, rate, review, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And now back to the episode. I will say one of my favorite parts. I got so excited just starting this movie because right at the beginning, the Halloween music cuts in and it just gets me excited. And I don't mean that in a weird way. But I love it. It's like, it's iconic. It's classic. It just brings back my childhood. And every Halloween movie has the same song playing. And it's like probably one of the most recognizable theme songs ever made. You hear it, it's Michael Myers, it's Halloween. And it starts out that way, and it's I love it.
That I was thinking about this too, like as I was watching the movie, the synthesizer, is that what it is? The instrument that they're using to create the music. It's got that. It's not like
the high pitched, like
Yes, that just hearing that takes me immediately back to the 80s. I mean, not really, because I was born late 80s. I don't remember it, but just that time period, like just hearing the music, hearing the instrument that they used, creates a feeling of nostalgia. That's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I hear it and I just automatically think people getting stabbed. But yeah, and you and I briefly mentioned this right before we started. But what I didn't know going in, because apparently I didn't know as much as I thought, and you mentioned it, is that John Carpenter did the score.
Yes, the director.
I knew this was a John Carpenter movie, but I didn't know that he owned this iconic song.
Yeah. Let's talk about the music for a minute, because so he has done a lot of music for movies that he's directed.
Okay.
And obviously this is one that is like when you hear the theme for Halloween, it's very recognizable. Everybody knows it. You see it all the time in social media. It's become kind of like the Shining music, which is also super iconic. I would say this is maybe in that level.
Okay.
So John Carpenter had shown a cut of the movie to one of the studio executives before he had inserted the music.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And she was like, "It's not that scary." It's scary, but it's not
without the music. Yeah.
And I was thinking about that as I was watching it, because did you get any jump scares? Did you ever like?
I don't think so. It's mostly just suspense as he's like coming after her, right?
Yeah.
I
There
don't think there's
was,
really any. I mean, I think that maybe at some point when one of the bodies falls down, there might be like a little bit, but nothing
yeah.
particular that's, it's no Conjuring,
I
right? But
actually, I can't remember what made me jump scare, but there was, and it was less about the score and more about just the sound effect. It was just loud.
mhm,
And it made me kind of jump, but less out of fear and more out of just like the abruptness of the sound effect being so loud. That's I
yeah,
can't even see. I can't even remember what the scene was in the movie because it wasn't that the scene was scary. The context, it was just like the sound literally made me jump, which then made me think, how scary would this be without the sound or without the music
true.
to
Yeah.
add to the context of the movie? Which
I
also
think
makes
that's
me
a good point.
wonder, r random tangent, but
Okay.
how do people who are non-hearing, people who are deaf, experience scary movies? Do they still
Yeah, I
find them
don't
as
know.
scary?
That's a good question.
I
I
would
don't
love to
know. I
ask.
mean, I feel like so much of it is sound based. And we talked about so many of these movies and like um if you're not feeling any vibrations from like a sound system or something like that that can build some of
Mhm.
that tension, like I think that it's just a completely different experience.
Yeah.
But that's curious, I don't know, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Also, like, not a lot of subtitles to be had, which is, for whatever, there's not a lot of words happening while he is slowly chasing after
True,
people.
because he never
So it's interesting.
speaks. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
And then
interesting.
another thing, just another little kind of trivia thing about the music and
Hmm.
the credits. I told you I watched the entire credits.
Right.
I was laughing because Zach and I were talking about the movie as it ended, and we were just noting how it was like clearly like a small budget film, but that then
Hmm.
went on to become a legendary horror movie.
Yeah.
But when you're watching the credits, it says it like credits the music to the Bowling Green Philharmonic, and I kind of laughed
Oh,
because a
interesting.
lot of like big Hollywood films, it's like the LA Philharmonic or the London Philharmonic or whatever, these like,
Hmm.
big well known orchestras. So I was like, what who is the Bowling Green Philharmonic? I just kind of laughed at
Right.
it. But then I read online that there is no Bowling Green Philharmonic. It was just made up. John Carpenter is from Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Oh, that's funny.
And it was just a little bit of a joke. It's just like the music is just him and some of his friends creating it using
Okay. So
synthesizers
they
or
just
whatever.
created that as like a that's
Like a
funny.
joke, I guess. So,
Interesting.
a little bit of trivia there. There is no Bowling Green
Bowling
Philharmonic.
Green Philharmonic. That is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess technically there is if that's what he wants to call himself, but
Maybe we should go
that
move to Bowling Green and start one.
yeah, sure. Sounds like a great place. But no, that's interesting. I appreciate that you watched the whole credits because I definitely didn't. Because I wasn't, looking for anything particular. But I feel this is educational for a movie that came out before I was born. I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So score, loved it. I think that one of the other things that added to that I just appreciated about it is that, it opens up from Michael's perspective as a kid and you get that like first person view. Like
Mhm.
it's like you are the camera moving in. It's a little wibbly wobbly, which probably helps with low budget. But also, like, you don't often find a movie where you get to be in the perspective of the killer, right? You don't get that with Nightmare on Elm Street. You don't really get that with Friday the
Oh,
13th, I don't
interesting.
think. But
Yeah.
like, I think that that's a pretty common thing with Halloween where, you're in the eyes of Michael as he's hiding behind things and looking at people. And again, it's not throughout the movie, but it happens more than once. So it's just
Mm.
kind of a different
Or
in
like
the
over
eyes
his
of the
shoulder. We got
right,
that a couple
right.
times as he's like standing there watching through the window.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting thing that I appreciated that kind of gave it a little bit of its own feel and character, especially when you talk about 80s slasher films.
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger is the funny-ish, goofy, weird, over the top villain.
With no sense of
Jason
style.
Voorhees with no sense of style. Although I'm buying you that sweater. But Jason Voorhees, who you haven't met yet, he is similar to Michael Myers in that he doesn't run.
Mhm.
He is very just kind of like up tall, walks after you, comes after you, does the thing. He might be someone that might put a sheet over his head just for trickery, but also he's just very just like he's kind of evil, pure evil, does the thing, doesn't really no personality to him, right?
Mhm.
Which is kind of what we talked about briefly on the Nightmare on Elm Street episode. Is that both Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees are easier to redo as characters because they are not known for the actor playing them. They are known for the portrayal of the character behind a mask. Whereas Freddy Krueger has a recognizable face and a recognizable personality, so that even when they did remake Nightmare on Elm Street, it was hard. It was a hard sell for anyone that was a big fan of Robert Englund.
Right. To
So
recreate the
anyway,
character.
so that's just kind of
Is
interesting.
Jason also, does he also not speak behind the mask?
He also does not speak.
So yeah, that's a
Also
lot
does not
easier
speak.
to throw on a mask and then run around creeping people out with a fake knife or
Yep.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting way of going about it. But what also is interesting, right, is that what makes Halloween, and this goes back to your rule, what makes Halloween hard to remake is the connection with Laurie Strode, which is why, well, and we're going to get into the timeline a little
Yeah.
bit. 3 different timelines of Laurie Strode's timeline. Out of, actually did 80 something percent of it probably from memory, but there was a Collider article that talked about, like, 13 movies, 5 different timelines. It's really, in my opinion, 4 different timelines, but a lot of them are all based around different continuities of Laurie Strode. So she's kind of, Jamie Lee Curtis is kind of what makes it. She's the reason they brought it back again. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, it's interesting. So she kind of is that continuity piece for Michael Myers. So if they ever decide to, redo it, they're going to have to figure that out. Without Jamie Lee Curtis, I think she's done at this point because they just came out last year with the last one that she will be in. And she's not getting any younger. There's, if they're going to reboot it, they're going to have to figure out a way to make it original. I think it's going to be difficult. Oh, on that note, talking about Laurie Strode, my last point that I want to talk about, if depending on, I don't know what else you might have, but the thing that really kind of made me be like, come on, man, like almost making me laugh, is that every time Laurie kills him, she throws the damn knife down by his body.
Yes.
And then he comes back and then she stabs him and she's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then throws the knife down. I'm like, you've got to be shitting
Keep
me.
the knife. What are you doing?
Hold on to the knife.
Yeah.
Oh man. I just thought that was funny. That made me chuckle. She was like, oh, I've got him. Let me just place it by his hand and go stand over here and turn my back to him. Oh, and then he came back again. Okay, I'm just gonna sit here, and
I like how
he's gonna get up off the ground.
I like how the first time she got him, she stabbed him with a knitting needle.
Yes. I mean, well done. She used what she had, man.
Yeah. She's
a survivor.
She is a survivor. She was quick with that thing, just right through the neck.
Yeah, which actually it parallels her a little bit a little bit less so, but when you look at Nightmare on Elm Street and the girl whose name is lost on me at the moment, but her being like the survivor that actually takes down Freddy Krueger, while Jamie Lee Curtis's character, while Laurie, didn't, in the end, Donald Pleasance showed up, Dr. Loomis showed up with his gun and fired a few times, but she held her own.
Mm-hmm.
She was able to hold him off. Mm-hmm. And that's something to be said. After all of her friends had been killed, none of them were able to do it. So I think that it's another instance of a movie in that time frame where, you have Last Woman Standing and she was able to hold him off. Yeah. Now, I don't know how that would have went had, Dr. Loomis not shown up with a gun, but
she would have held her own.
But I can appreciate it.
She would have held her
own.
She had those coat hangers. She was stabbing with the coat hangers. But also,
there was like 7 more things in the house to stab him with.
This was an example. So last season, me being the newbie here to scary movies, I learned about the trope of the final girl and how oftentimes in this time period, the final girl was often like the most, like, she was the virgin. She was the one who, like, the girls, the people who got killed were the ones who were like fooling around and smoking in bed and like, the troublemakers.
Which, that trope matches this movie because she's like the smart girl and she's not really seen, she
likes to knit while she babysits.
Yeah, she's a knitter. I thought about that. I was like, oh, she's got the knitting bag and like her friends are all trying to do the thing. She's a responsible one. She's like, yeah, I'll babysit the other kid too.
Yeah.
Bring her over. Right. And she's better for it.
Yeah.
She's better for it. Well, is there anything else you had, or do you want me to kind of break down this timeline for you? It's a little extensive. I'll try to be quick.
I think that was everything I had. There was a few other little tiny trivia points, but they're not.
Okay. Well, So let's go into the timeline.
Okay.
So I don't know how much you read about. Did you read anything in your reading? They talk about like the 27 million different timelines of Halloween.
Well, I looked at like Jamie Lee Curtis's. I was curious about, was this her big breakout role? She had a few roles before this one, but this was like her big breakout. But then
Yeah.
she was in other Halloween movies, and then there was others that she was not in. So I'm not fully tracking the whole universe of Halloween. Walk me through it.
Okay. So again, this is a little bit inspired by a Collider article that was like 13 movies, 5 different timelines. I'm really going to only touch on 4 of them. I'll tell you where I think they mean the 5th one is, but really, and again, I'm actually rather impressed that I actually generated this from memory and then just checked myself with the article. So 1978, Halloween comes out. You watch that. Laurie Strode, she is just someone that lives in the town that he goes back to. He shows back up in town, and then he goes after Laurie. So in the original timeline, in 3 years later, 1981, Halloween 2 comes out. And it follows the story immediately following. Jamie Lee Curtis is in the hospital, and he continues pursuing her. Dr. Loomis returns. He returns through most of these movies. I'll just bring it up briefly, but he's also in the second one. The big piece that breaks this continuity apart is that in part 2, we discover on this timeline that she is his long lost sister, that she was put up for adoption as a child. So he knew he had a sister out there, and somehow through his magical Michael ways knew she was his sister.
Now,
so really he's going after his other sister.
His other sisters, because he had killed his older sister.
Correct.
Again,
correct.
Another one who was like fooling around with the guy, and so he kills her. And then
he hates sex.
He hates sex. Yeah, we were much more moral in the 80s. You know, like,
it's true.
No sluts.
It's true. No, yeah. All the weed smoking, no sex.
Exactly. And so this was his younger sister.
Yes, I guess so. I don't know when she would have been put up for adoption, but I guess so. Yeah, I guess him being like 8, she probably would have been younger, so he remembered her being there. So yeah, that makes sense. I guess she was probably given up as adoption as a baby when he was, like 6 or something. Give or take. We'll say give or take. But yeah, so she had been put up for adoption. Halloween 2, he is continuing to the pursuit of Laurie Strode, who we find out is his sister, again, in this timeline only. So then the next year, Halloween 3 comes out, and it's called Season of the Witch. Spoiler, I've never seen it. But after the first 2 movies...
That's not a spoiler.
Yeah, I don't know why I said that. Because spoiler, I haven't seen it, which means I don't know spoilers. No. So the interesting, weird thing about Halloween 3 is that at that point, John Carpenter was trying to make a series of anthology movies all based around weird things that happened at Halloween.
On Halloween.
So they kind of, So they closed the book on Michael Myers, and it's about like these weird Halloween masks that like take over children when they put them on, or they become permanently like attached to their face. Again, I haven't seen it. No Michael Myers, no connection to the previous 2. And so it got poorly received. And so they realized, oh, well, let's go back to the Michael Myers thing. So 6 years later, they come out with Halloween 4, which is a sequel to the second one, continuing the Laurie Strode timeline. But Halloween 4, it's been 6 years. Well, I guess it's actually been 7 years since Halloween 2, we'll say, right? So approximately 7 years later, Laurie Strode has had a child. She has a little girl. And she died in a car accident. So Laurie Strode is gone.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, it happens off camera. We learn that there's this little girl. It turns out it's Laurie's daughter. So it's his niece. And her name is Jamie. So Michael comes back, and he's going after Laurie's daughter, Jamie. And she is kind of the new through point of the series.
Okay.
Dr. Loomis returns as, same doctor, still Michael Myers expert, which leads directly into the next sequel, which is Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. So 4 was The Return. 5 is Revenge of Michael Myers. Came out a year later. So these were back-to-back years.
Wow.
Continues with the storyline of Jamie, the niece. I think at the beginning of 5, Jamie like kills the woman taking care of her. So she almost like follows the same weird thing that Michael did when he was a kid. Because she's like, at this point, she's a little girl. So she's traumatized from her uncle Michael trying to kill her.
Her mom.
So the next movie starts out. Yeah. And like the next movie starts out with her putting on a clown mask and I think going after her babysitter or whoever it was. So it like parallels, right? There's this weird connection between her and Michael as he continues to kill her. There's like a scene in one of the movies where she like, for a moment, he almost like isn't aggressive. She like pulls his mask up and he like doesn't, like for a split second, there's almost like him not being evil. And then like someone comes in and disturbs him anyway, and he goes after her.
Ugh.
Also, Dr. Loomis returns again for this movie. So that's 4 and 5.
Okay.
So when we tie this to my childhood, so that's 5 comes out in 1989. I'm 7 years old. I'm a massive Halloween fan at this point, I guess at 7, because I remember that movie, and it ends throughout the whole movie. We see this character with cowboy boots, and they only show him from like the calf down. He comes off a bus. He's like walking around. We don't know who he is. At the end of 5, Michael is in jail. He's behind locked bars. He's behind locked doors. He's in jail. Somehow they got him in jail. I don't remember how. But at the very end of the movie, I think Dr. Loomis goes to the police station. There's a fire. The alarms are going off. Everyone's dead. And this guy in the cowboy boots has broken Michael out. And like, end of movie. Obviously, all these end with some sort of cliffhanger because Michael always comes out.
Wait. I have a question. Did they let him wear his mask in jail?
I don't remember.
Do we ever see his face?
I assume his mask was on, but they probably are like not messing around. They're not trying to like mess around with his body. This dude's like superhuman evil, right?
Yeah. They're like, you just keep that. You can wear that.
Yeah, you just keep that.
Okay.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
You look like William Shatner. We'll pretend that you're, a Star Trek.
Yeah, I needed to know.
He signed a couple of William Shatner autographs. Okay, so Halloween 5 ends. Me and my mom are like, oh my God, what's going to happen in 6? Who's the man with the cowboy boots? We never learned. We're like, who is this guy? What's going on? Is he still going after his niece? Like we're feeling like this is prime, great Halloween horror movie time. And then 6 years goes by. Halloween 6 never comes out. And we're like, what's happening with Halloween, man? Every single day, me and my mom were like, what's going to happen with Halloween? Maybe not every day, but legitimately, we were excited about how 5 ended. We wanted to know what was coming next. 6 years later, the greatest disappointment of our lives come when Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers comes out. We're so excited. We might have even seen it in theaters. But so basically, this movie starts out, and at the end of part 5, apparently he went and kidnapped his niece, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 6 years between movies, somehow, like some cult got involved. The guy with the cowboy boots was like involved in some cult. They took him somewhere that he didn't kill everyone. Don't really understand. He has impregnated his niece, Jamie.
Oh,
now he's the one having sex. Also, what? And so the movie starts out and basically she's escaping just having had his baby. He's killing everyone. And then this is about him trying to chase down his infant son.
What?
It's pretty wild. Honestly, pretty disappointing for 13-year-old Chris and his mom. And I think the whole world, because let's be honest, they didn't make a sequel after that. Right? That's where the original timeline ends.
It just got weird. It just wasn't.
It got weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, they brought in this cult thing, and they I don't know. I would like to interview them and find out why they decided to go with that. But that's where the original timeline ends. Okay, I'll stop. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end of Laurie Strode as his sister. That's the end of Jamie as his niece, who apparently he impregnates. It's weird. Okay, So then 1998 rolls by. So now it's been 3 years since 6 came out. Probably didn't do too well. And they do the Laurie Strode continuity reset. So what's special about 1998? It's 20 years since the original one dropped, right? In 78. So Laurie Strode continuity reset. So Halloween 1 is part of this timeline. Halloween 2 is part of this timeline. Laurie Strode is his sister, right? That's the key point in Halloween 2, right? Because that was not the case in part 1. So this is 20 years later, Halloween H2O, where it's been 20 years since Halloween 2, when he tried to kill her and she was in the hospital, etc. And now he comes back for her. And she's grown up. She has a son. He's in college. She like works she lives there, and her son's going on this thing. And he comes back for her and her son. And she's like she's with this man or whatever. I don't know if he's her husband. I don't remember. But she then never tells anyone she had this murderous brother until he starts coming back for her. And she's like, that's my brother, Michael. Right. So the end of that happens. And this is the one where she cuts his head off at the end. There's a car accident. He's trapped between a barrier. She cuts his head off. It's done. However, 4 years later, Halloween Resurrection comes out, and we learn that he put the mask on someone else. It wasn't him. He's back one more time after Laurie Strode again. And even this movie left open-ended, but end of timeline. So the Laurie Strode continuity reset, 4 movies to include the original 2, and then 2 additional ones with Jamie Lee Curtis reprising her role to continue that timeline without the timeline where she died and her niece.
Got it. So they didn't like explain away the whole niece situation. They just said, we're just going to pretend like that never happened.
Yep, which is kind of a trend with the series. Yeah, they just kind of partially rebooted it. They just said everything after this, wipe it away. Let's just start with this and bring Jamie Lee Curtis back. And that's what they did.
Got it.
So then that kind of capped it. And we're like, okay, well, that's kind of a good ending to Halloween, right? They brought Jamie Lee Curtis back. They did a couple movies. Cool. Well, then Rob Zombie, who you and I talked about a little bit, right? Who you didn't know who he was. Rob Zombie came in kind of when he was making some horror movies and decided he wanted to make a remake of Halloween. So in 2007 and 2009, he releases Halloween and Halloween 2. Halloween is basically a remake of the first one with his Rob Zombie weird. There's some hillbilly-ish like notes to it.
Okay.
The very Rob Zombie style. But honestly, someone else playing Laurie Strode, someone else playing Dr. Loomis, pretty much a remake of the first one. Halloween 2, less of a remake. It does kind of have some callbacks, but it's just a sequel to the first one. And that's it. End of timeline. Rob Zombie did 2 movies. He remade the first 2 movies-ish, right? And that ends 2009. Then we get to the last timeline.
Okay.
Which is the most recent timeline. And
this is another reset.
Another reset. The Laurie Strode continuity reset again. So after Rob Zombie movies failed to reignite the love of the series, Jamie Lee Curtis comes back again as Laurie Strode to fix, what went wrong in the last reset when they did H2O and all that, right? Well, what went wrong? They get John Carpenter back in as a composer and executive producer. Jason Blum gets involved this time, from Blumhouse.
Blum. Okay.
And so, And so the way that they decided, because even though John Carpenter was involved after the first one, however they got in the room, no one was in the room where it happens. Hamilton callback. But we don't know how it was decided, but they said, you know what? We don't think we like the timeline where she's his sister. We like the first movie, and that's it. Nothing else counts. She's not his sister. She never had a daughter named Jamie. She never died in a car accident. He never came back 20 years later. None of that counts. It's like someone went back in time and changed the future.
Yeah.
Right. So 2018, 2021, 2022, a trilogy is released that is the most recent Halloween movies. Halloween in 2018, right? Which at this point is 40 years since the original release. Right? 80, 90, 10, 12. Yeah. 40 years after the original release. And it's Jamie Lee Curtis as a grown-up. She's a grandmother. Or is she just an older mother? She's a mother of an adult. Long gray hair, 40 years after she was in the original. She's a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. She's, lots of protection and guns and things because that whole traumatic incident as a child has kind of messed with her. And then this trilogy is, Halloween, then Halloween Kills, then Halloween Ends, ending with the apparent, real, actual, maybe possibly death of Michael Myers. And we wrap up all the timelines. And that movie just came out last year. Oh, wait. Yep. 2022. That's last year. I don't know what year it is. It's fine. But yeah.
That is so much. It's so complicated. My big question is like, as a theater goer or as someone following, all of these universes, and you talked about your disappointment there at some, along the way, but when you go in after one big reset, what is that experience like? Are you having to piece together like, oh wait, that didn't happen, this didn't happen, they started fresh, or do they set it up in a way that makes it obvious?
So I think from my perspective, someone who's kind of followed it forever, right? When H2O came out, there was probably a little bit of like, wait, what? Oh, okay. You just kind of go with it. You're like, oh, this is just 20 years later. And usually before a movie comes out, right, there's like stories about it and whatnot. This is, had she survived. I think on this most recent timeline, there was a lot of articles about, John Carpenter's coming back. They're redoing it. Original timeline. She's not his brother. They actually talk about it in the movie. Oh, that's how they do it. They do this weird callback in the movie where people are talking about, because like it's a generation later, people know that happened in Haydenfield, right? So
Okay.
they're like, wasn't she like his sister or something? And they're like, no, that was just some silly rumor that people made up, right?
Oh,
So they
interesting.
do like a little like callback
Clever.
to that timeline. But for me, it was pretty easy to follow because I read up about it. I see new Halloween series coming out. I get excited. I send previews to my mom, and overall they were fine. I enjoyed seeing Michael Myers back on screen, and honestly, Jamie Lee Curtis is great. Getting Laurie Strode back for one last go around was fun.
Nice. And you said so the third one, Halloween 3, you didn't watch.
The Season of the Witch is like the only one I haven't seen. The one with the weird masks,
but every other one you saw.
But I've seen all the other ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
I don't know. I think that if I had to group, maybe not a favorite movie.
Like a favorite timeline?
I think, honestly, the original timeline, minus Halloween 6. I think if I had a favorite timeline, it was 1 through 5. And because as a kid, I was really into it. Again, 6 was kind of a disappointment. I would go back and watch it again. Maybe it would hold up. But I think like the continuing adventure of Michael Myers going after his family and then going after the daughter, she was a really compelling little girl actress. And then seeing her journey and how it paralleled with Michael, and then Michael going after her, like it just seemed, again, from memory, this has been a long time since I've seen him. I think that's my favorite timeline.
Okay.
Halloween H2O was fun at the time, but it was nothing crazy. And then the most recent ones, again, fun, but fun callback, fun to watch. None of them really like did anything crazy. It's not like, and for being recent, it's not like they were super scary, right? They were just Michael Myers.
Yeah. It sounds like those first 5 were nostalgic or whatever. 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Yeah,
take you back.
Well, I think that's what they've been trying to reproduce and reignite the series ever since. Yeah. Right. I think after 6 came out, and it just wasn't great. They struggled to continue the storyline, and whoever took over for 6 took it a little bit too far off course. And they've, ever since they've been trying to reignite it.
Yeah.
And so,
but it's cool how how it took little twists and turns along the way, and they tried something and they failed, and then they were like, oh no, the whole point of this is Michael Myers. Like, we're not going to do just a random Halloween thing. And then they figured out like, oh, Jamie Lee Curtis is a hit. Yeah. Like, it's cool. I think it's really cool how like there's this evolution of the world of Michael Myers.
Well, and it's also interesting, and I hadn't thought about this, but I think that they learned early on something that sequels, right? We're living in the time of sequels where people like Bill Murray, when he was young making Ghostbusters, can come back and make a Ghostbusters movie a billion years later, right? That Harrison Ford can be in another Indiana Jones movie bazillions of years later, or like doing the Tron movie a million years later, or doing Blade Runner, and like all these movies that like we're seeing it. We're in the lifetime of these characters. They made these epic movies when they were young, and while they're still around, they're continuing these series.
Yeah.
Whether some are better than others, of course, but I think what they learned, like I'll use Ghostbusters as an example. They tried to reboot it, and it didn't do great. Yeah. But when they did a callback to it on the same timeline with children of those characters and brought them in, that's more popular because that brings the nostalgia back. And so they realized that, with this series, that they're like, oh, well, Laurie Strode's, she's the through point. That's what we need, is we need more Laurie Strode, because it's a compelling storyline.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought I feel like we're learning that with a lot of movies that are tapping back, is you're bringing back the same characters.
Yeah.
Because anyone can remake an old movie, and that doesn't mean we want to watch it, but you're bringing back the same character 40 years later and seeing where she's at now in the world and how he or she does that. Anyway,
that's interesting.
I think that's what makes
I wonder if audience members see themselves more in Laurie, especially audience members of that generation who were teenagers or young adults during the 80s, and now they see Jamie Lee Curtis playing this character in the late 2000s. And if it's like, I remember what it was like to be there in the 80s, and I know where I am now here in my life. And I wonder if they're just seeing yourself in the character is what makes that connection more real. I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think for people like my mom, right? She was probably about the same age as Jamie Lee Curtis when it came out.
Yeah.
Maybe actually probably pretty close. So like, she's watching someone who was like the same age as her.
Yeah.
And now all these years later, same.
Yep. Well, that was fun talking about Halloween. I think this is a movie. We didn't do the scary scale. Do you want to skip the scary scale for this one, or do we want to try and give it a number?
Yeah, this is a fun one. I don't know how we would rate it.
Yeah.
We rate it probably the same as for Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, totally agree. I think this is an easy one to watch if you're like me and you don't love scary movies. This one isn't. There's no gore. Like it's pretty chill, and it's an iconic one. So like you owe it to yourself to see. Oh, I've now covered 2 of the major 3 like iconic villain characters. So we got to get that third one in there at some point. But here's my plea to you: if you're one of those not scary movie fans, you've convinced yourself that you don't like scary movies. You think you can't handle them, y'all. It's Halloween. You gotta put at least. I mean, you can maybe do Hocus Pocus if you want to keep it chill, but give it a little bit of effort. Like pick one scary movie, maybe something that's a little more on the mild side, and give it a go. Because it's spooky season. That's the best time to watch scary movies.
It's the best time.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna do it, pick a movie that's 50 years old, man.
Yeah.
It's not gonna scare you.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Sam's a scaredy cat, and he basically loved it.
And I did great, and you will do great too.
Yeah, we believe in you.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us on this special Halloween episode. Happy Halloween week. Have a great Halloween. Do some trick-or-treating. Watch some horror movies, or at least one. Take this time to catch up on Scary Movie Fright Night Season 1, because Season 2 is coming soon. And we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.